We're recording right now, so we'll go ahead and get started on the meeting. Manu's coming in, Raffers is coming in, Joseph's coming back. Susan started surgery tonight at 6 o'clock Arizona time, which is 7 o'clock my time, which is 9 o'clock Joseph's time. And she may or may not get out of her surgery in time, but she's prepared some stuff. We're going to be talking about that from last week. Plus, we have some new things going on. So I might as well get this started. Peter, you're the first face that I saw tonight. How are you feeling, and what do you expect to get out of today's meeting?
I'm feeling calm, but I'm also feeling inquisitive, I guess would be the feeling. I have had a bit of a roller coaster of a week of getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do a course in America every day. And I was exhausted last night, so that was fun. But I was having a cup of tea this morning, and I put a teaspoon of honey in my tea, which I love to do. And I was reflecting upon the fact that one bee spends its whole life, if I'm to believe what I've read, to create 1 teaspoon of honey. And I was having my tea and enjoying it, and I was reflecting on the processional effect of that, 100 billion years ago, the universe blinked so that Earth would have bees so that I could have a cup of tea with honey in it and enjoy it. Yeah. And that processional effect. So I'm kind of philosophical at the moment. The lovely cat is out doing chores. She may or may not get back here in time. But if she doesn't, she sends everyone her love. Joseph, how do you feel? And I'm expecting to get more juicy conversations today. Joseph, how do you feel, and what would you like to get out of today?
I feel pretty good. I was a little bit scattered here for a moment and is kind of getting my papers together. But looking to build on the conversation from last week, have another great conversation and learn, move a little bit deeper into what Susan has shared. But overall I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm happy to be here with everybody, and it's good to see everybody. And so Henry, how are you doing, and what would you like to get out of today?
Thanks, Joe. Joe, feeling well. Contemplating, actually. I was thinking about time and timing, because time is your deepest fundamental, and you got to be very careful with it. We all only have 168 hours, and I've done quite a bit of work with Kelly on this, and you just got to be very conscious of how it rolls, and time fills according to the space. I mean, this call itself, it runs an hour and a half. Now we're pushing it to 2 hours. Sometimes it goes over that. It's a very lacking in terms of understanding how it actually integrates for people. And we've measured it in many places and tested it in groups and sessions. And if you don't do that, you'll get drop off. Just be conscious of that. But yeah, looking forward to the call, see where it takes us. John Butler, good to see you. How you feeling? What do you want to get out of the call today?
Thanks, Henry. I'm feeling great. It's an absolutely superb day in Perth. I've walked in the park and it's just magnificent. I feel really grateful to be alive and grateful to be able to walk, and grateful to be able to come along here and share with all of you and learn from you. And I'm hoping that in another 2 hours' time, I'll be just a little bit more knowledgeable and wiser than I am now. And that will be of value to me and those around me. So that's what I hope to take out of today. So Raffers, how do you feel, and what do you hope to take out of today?
I feel great, actually. Happy that and grateful that some of you decided to join us today and carry on exploring Bucky's wealth again with Kelly's energy missing, which is always makes me feel grateful for anybody investing time and effort to learn more. But the expect today is again to keep on exploring Bucky's words and teachings and make them more contemporary. considering what he wrote. He did what in the 1960s, and he's now at 2021. So there's a gap there to be filled. So great that we can get together and get into that process. So Manu, how do you feel and what do you expect to get out today, my friend?
Bring up, bum, 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 bring up, dun, 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 baby. I'm imagining, and I feel good. I'm grateful that we're together. I'm grateful to be aware, conscious, with the gift of choice, focus, measure, and repeat it. And I like the local. And Steve sent out this video of some comments on Bucky. If so many locally where they are did the right thing, there will be a change, and it will be a quantum change for the better for everybody. So network of local changes, applications. That's how I feel. And I expect to learn more, to exchange more, that we progress in design and application and building of artifacts to improve local applications. Steve, how do you feel? What do you expect?
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, I feel about time and timing. I almost got caught. I thought this was so easy to be on time for this meeting, but things have changed today. So life is amazing. I'm grateful to be here. I'm slowly catching up. I see all male energy on our call today, which is very interesting. I just sent Julian a link, Raffers, in case it hadn't been done before. Thank you for catching that. I updated the list and I put it on a spreadsheet, and evidently some people got dropped off. What I'm really thrilled about, and I'm missing the ladies, I notice, but what I'm really thrilled about is that the purpose of this call, as I understand it, is to bring all of this Bucky terminology and the Bucky ideology and the Bucky frame of reference or perspective to our present world and to our business plans and to our life plans and this concept of design. And I'm really excited about that. What we're going to start with tonight is a video that maybe you guys saw it. I sent out the link, but it's put out by the Fuller Foundation, and it kind of just gives a general description of Buckminster Fuller that you guys probably already know this. You're going to see it. So it's a nice little institutional promo. But one of the interesting things that it does is it defines pollution. It gives a Bucky definition for pollution. So we're going to catch that. So if Susan can join us, she's going to join us. If not, my expectation is we're going to cover these topics, and I'm going to have a better understanding, a little bit better apprehension, a little bit better comprehension, having completed our discussion for this evening. So, okay, and Manu's pointing out here that it's Bucky's grandson. Manu, do you want to talk about that while I get this set up?
I was just saying that the guy who is talking the video is Bucky's grandson. In actual fact, he worked with him quite a lot towards the end of his life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. And hang on, it's up. I'm going to share my screen.
Really fundamental to his life.
Oh my goodness. I usually control my environment a little bit better than this. Here we go. And make sure we can hear this. If there's any issues, let me know.
Really fundamental to his life was how do we make the world work for 100% of humanity and all of life without destroying the world and without disadvantaging people.
My gosh, it just dawns on me that we probably would do well to stop and read each one of these quotes and kind of discuss them, because man, these ideas are going by at 90 miles an hour. But let's walk through it, and then we can see where we want to go from there.
He was expelled, and then he went and he worked at a mill up in Canada. Again, found that he really related to, making things and working and making machines work. He saw there was this process where we were doing more and more, getting more and more capability out of less and less use of materials, which was therefore really fundamental in beginning to think about the world and how we actually make the world work for everybody. It's not just by more and more stuff, it's by learning to utilize materials much more effectively, really at quantum leaps of capacity. Generalized problem solver. And it wasn't surprising that Bucky wrote a book called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. I think he thought like a sailor and a navigator. And as a navigator, you're like trying to be able to look out in the cosmos and be able to define where you're located, where you want to go, how you get there most efficiently.
There's the quote, which was in your email, so we can discuss that.
Somebody asked him, well, what are you? He said, well, I'm not a thing, I'm not a noun, I'm an evolutionary process. I seem to be a verb. And I think that's how he lived, and that's, I think, what the record shows. We can make the world work for all of life. It really comes down to, do enough individuals demonstrate enough integrity in their choices in life He felt like that was the really fundamental thing. If enough of us really stand up and demonstrate integrity in the choices that we're making, then it will work.
Okay. Comments, questions? What struck you watching that video?
Everything is there. is really the nutshell of who Bucky was, what was the dedication of his life to. Sorry, my voice is a little bit coarse this morning. I don't know why. I mean, what came out to me, one, navigation. If you were a navigator, we are navigators. Then you scan for, you want to be aware of where you are, location. You determine where you want to be. And you devise how to get there in the most efficient way. That was one thing that came. The other thing that came to me was Bucky thought of himself as an evolutionary process, most likely a verb. And we'll be talking about a verb in terms of action, in terms of words, in terms of leading calibrator, in terms of many, many things. And then the last thing that I got here is, if enough individuals stood up and demonstrated integrity in the choice they make, then it will work. Maybe at the nick of time, but it will work. If enough individuals stood up and demonstrated integrity in the choices that they make, then it will work.
Comment?
So,
Okay, good.
yeah.
If you're complete.
Now, we're just going to mention critical mass in this.
Well, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay. It's funny, I got a little something different out of that quote. Let's hear from you other guys. What did you pick up out of this?
Out of the, good.
Go ahead, Joe.
Out of the whole video or the
Whatever catching you.
ephemeralization. More and more with less and less. And I think that's essentially, that was the quote that you called out with the idea of pollution. I think that's a critical point in the sense that not only how we pollute, well, we pollute the environment and things along those lines as well, but we pollute our minds in how we see things, and how we actually don't necessarily look at the whole. And I think that's really kind of critical. And I always think of operating manual for spaceship Earth in that particular circumstance. I think that's a really important point, that we pollute how, we think things either cost too much or whatever, and we have a different, very specialized viewpoint how to address problems, and we don't look at holistically. And so that we have like politicians answering it with short-term solutions in some cases, pretty much all cases, but it's just a question of understanding the whole. So I think those two are the main points that I take away as ephemeralization and understanding the whole.
Good. Raffers, you were about to say something.
Yes, I was about to say that actually today, it's the first time actually being able to make a connection because of this video about the fact that to make the world work for everybody, nobody's at an advantage compared to anybody else. that we need to be able to do that, we need to do more with less. That is, the less we use to create the higher impact or the better use of what we have by using it less. That means we can make this world work.
Wow.
The mayor's, all right.
Anybody else?
I like what you said, Joe. I agree about pollution in a metaphysical sense. Because what you see on that video was the physical. Bucky demonstrated everything, ephemeralization more with less in terms of the house, the car, the geodesic dome. Now we're evolving out of that into the next phase. So yes, the mind is polluted, and he didn't really touch on that. This is a direction that Kelly's actually and a lot of our discussions are bringing towards, because that is where the future is. That's the next phase. And so it's good to talk about pollution. What you making that relationship to the metaphysical is a great advancement in the evolution of what we're doing. So that's pretty cool. You know, he talked about Dymaxion, dynamic maximum tension. So understanding how those dynamics work will actually make the difference, because it comes back to the choice of the individual. We as individuals don't have a lot of say in how much coal gets burnt out there. There are certain things that we can do. We can have, you know, so it comes back to what is it that we can influence. That I think is probably the core. That's what I got out of that. What do you reckon, John?
One of the things that comes across to me from Bucky is that he lives a huge faith. He demonstrates faith all the time. And I think that came out of what happened when he went to commit suicide and was told to devote his life to the betterment of the planet and mankind. I'd like to grow that level of faith in my own day-to-day life. So that's one of the things I find interesting and worth modelling on with Bucky.
Any other thoughts? Peter, have you expressed anything from that video yet?
No, I haven't. I think John just hit the nail on the head for me. And thanks, John, because I've never actually connected faith with Bucky, but it's such a powerful connection. And, you know, faith to me is, if you pray for rain, take an umbrella. And, you know, in other words, it's an expectation that even if it looks impossible or feels impossible, it's going to come into reality. And I think, you know, however we all individually connect with Great Spirit or the universe or whatever we call that, or however we connect with the metaphysical and the spiritual, I was coaching some people the other day, and these words came out of my mouth, and I had to sit later that night and integrate them for about half an hour after the training session was over. And it was that we're living in an age where radical trust in the universe is required if we're to bring into reality or to make manifest an actual collective vision of the world that works for everyone. But that also requires a deep level of faith, because I might be wrong, but from what I read, many, many times Bucky faced financial ruin, bankruptcy, business failure, you name it. And I read somewhere that he said to an assistant, because they had to make payroll for one of his businesses, and the money wasn't there, the funds weren't there, it looked like disaster. And he just said, it will come. And it came in a rather obtruse way, and you know, almost the last second. But as you were saying that, John, I was thinking, you know, I don't think we have to put ourselves into crisis or go into emergency to the level that he did. But that level of faith and trust in the metaphysical or great spirit, as he called it, you know, I've been looking at myself for the last couple of weeks and wondering at my own inability to hold steadfast all the time to the vision of whatever my part of contributing to make the world work for everyone. And I really, I mean, I've been journaling about it a lot, and I really just came to the conclusion that, you know, I just need to grow the faith muscle. So, you know, that was very a very powerful insight you shared then, John. Thank you.
Cool.
Steve wanted to say something before I intervene. I don't want to.
I'm happy to have your share, and I can wait. Please go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that, you know, there is no metaphysical without the physical. You can't talk of metaphysical on its own.
Sure.
There is no such thing. It is a duality. You could say the metaphysical manifests in the physical. But there is always and always existing that dance between the physical and the metaphysical. They coexist. That's what I wanted to add to this. So if you talk about faith, Bucky's faith was very much anchored in the physical, in that what he pursued and what he hoped was never in contradiction to the sum up of the experience. If there was contradiction, he was prepared to change that faith. In other words, the generalized laws are always the principles. The general principles are always true everywhere in the universe. And we understood the universe is his hypothesis. It is always true. So the moment is not true anymore, you got to change. And that is the essence of the pursuit of veritas, truth.
In that video, there was a thing about failed experiments. Do you remember the quote?
Yes.
Yes.
What was that?
Briefly.
Do you want to bring it up or talk about
Yeah.
that? I think that's quite significant.
Yes.
He sounded like Thomas Edison. Edison had a similar quote. It dawned on me we could go through this and take screenshots of each one of those quotes and add them as an artifact to this conversation, because man, there are some really good quotes that go by there, and they're not oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. They're not, no, they didn't narrate them, right? So if I
Really fundamental to his life.
when I come shooting through here, we can find some of these quotes. While we're going through, here's a quote about about ephemeral. If we do more with less, our response will be adequate to take care of everybody.
Yes. That's the quote I was referring to in my share when I was cut off by the stupid internet connection.
Right. What could a single person do to help humanity do more with less and create a world that works for everyone? I'm going to scoot through here.
He was countering Malthusian economics at that particular
Yes,
moment in
exactly.
time. So,
You want to explain that, Joseph, if you would, please?
Well, Malthusian economics basically says that the world we were going to run out of resources, where, essentially that population growth was going to be exponential and our ability to produce was going to become less and less. We weren't going to be able to support the world. Whereas Bucky was basically saying until economists have to learn about ephemeralization, that we're doing more and more with less and less resources, and that this could help service that this will be a way to look at servicing mankind, and that if it's just countered completely what other economists had thought at that particular moment in time. A lot of people thought. There's still some people that believe in somewhat of Malthusian type approach.
Right on.
I think Steve, it was quite, if you're looking for that, it was quite in the beginning.
Okay, I was just kind
It
of
was quite early in the video that talk about there's no such thing as a forced experiment. It was quite early.
Yes. He said it was unexpected results.
Outcome.
Like
Yeah. Outcomes.
Unexpected outcome, yes.
Well,
There is no such thing as a failed experiment, only experiments with unexpected outcomes.
Outcomes, yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay, well, should we just play it again? There it is.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's quite early. Just play.
There it is right there.
Yeah.
At 35 seconds in, so you were right on. There's no such thing as a failed experiment, only experiments with unexpected outcomes.
Okay, leave it on. That's cool.
Yeah.
Shall we listen to it again, everybody? Or is that?
Well, I mean, that's what Henry asked for. Like you display this.
What we're discussing. So
exactly.
Yeah, we can just discuss that, because you're talking about experiments. Experiments are the physical. We are the experiments. We are creating it. All his life was about experimental. Like you say, if the outcome wasn't what you expected, that was their expectation, they think they've failed. But according to Bucky, it was an unexpected outcome.
Right.
Right. That's a really important point, is to not be tied to the outcome, because actually that's where you get to truth in general. If you think about it in a sense that if you allow yourself to have maybe a desired outcome, but you shouldn't be necessarily tied to it. You have to just let it be what it is.
Yeah.
In order to really truly discover the truth, because otherwise your desires will pervert your the way you look at life and an experiment.
Yeah.
I will tell you about an experience of mine that, when I carry projects and things like that, there's always a lot of leftovers, things that are not used, or things that you buy in bulk and then you don't use all. And I've taken a habit of storing them somewhere. Of course, there is a cost to it. But in my experience, after a while, I always find a very beneficiary use of those. Either me or I give it out to somebody who is in need. So practically, there was a cost to me in salvaging, not just dumping it, salvaging it. And there is a lack until maybe I learn new, or until I'm aware of somebody that is in need or something like that. It's a little bit archaic, but it has worked for me for a while.
Cool. One of the any other comments or questions?
Yeah, actually, that quote is very important, because I can relate it to doing research. When you do, say, you work out a dissertation, I remember somebody telling me, what's your hypothesis? And he says, well, what if my hypothesis is wrong? So it doesn't matter. You did the work, and your work proved that you were wrong. So in fact, you have made a point about, so you have proven that your hypothesis was not correct. So that's also valid. So that's the whole point of actually doing scientific work. You start from somewhere. This is what I think will probably happen. But you have an unexpected outcome or the negative outcome you expected to get. So what? You still did the research, you still did the work, and you came around a certain conclusion. So that's always valid, and that relates nicely to the concept of veritas, rather than I want to be right or I don't want to be wrong, which is what we normally do. So again, this is a very valid point. And I guess instead of saying we could become we as a species would become a failed experiment, it would be, well, nature created an unexpected outcome that nature had to deal with and simply got rid of if we don't manage to actually correct our own trajectory.
Quite funny. When we did the whole Rich Dad thing, which was many years ago, that's where we met Raffers in Colombia and associated with Kelly and did a lot of work there. That wasn't the outcome we were expecting. It could have been called, I guess, a failed experiment. But then, the unexpected outcomes is 10 years down the track, we're still talking to each other. We're still connecting in a different way.
That's a great point.
Susan was there. He reached a lot of people and connected in a different way. It's just interesting.
Yeah, true. That's a very good point, Henry. Yeah, agree.
Cool. One of the things that impressed me about that is his car that he designed. Kind of looked like an Airstream trailer. And I just checked curiously. He designed that car for the 1933 World's Fair. Airstream came out in 1979, is what Google said. What
happened to Bucky was he built 2 or 3 of them, and a test driver was killed in a crash, and he cancelled the project.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the Mexican car was very unstable to drive. But still a great experiment as such.
But he got an unexpected result.
Yeah, and going back to the failed experiment, what I remember very clearly about the Rich Dad experiment, Henry, is that when you have achieved a huge level of success and you had to actually manage to get some big shots involved in the project, that's when Kiyosaki stopped it all. When in fact, that was to me a breaking point. That is, we're about to create something that became a high risk, but at the same time, high potential. And all that Kiyosaki saw was the risk. I said, I don't want to deal with this, so let's stop it. And I said, but again, that's what happened. But to me, it was just ludicrous. I mean, at the critical point, turning point, when something was about to happen, a breakthrough, and there was a breakout chance, fear took over, and then the whole thing was canceled.
It looked like a three.
That's my memories of it, Henry. You probably have a much better sense of what actually happened, but that was my impression at the time.
It was a 3-wheel vehicle. Was it front wheel drive or back wheel drive?
I don't know.
But it was unstable because it went 90 miles per hour.
Yeah, exactly.
It was way ahead of its time.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, what you see in the form of a vehicle is it reminds you of an aircraft.
Yeah, exactly.
The dynamics, so that's what, and one of the things that Bucky prefer is tension to compression.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What happened was he built cars, he built houses, and he built a lot of the stuff. And what he found was he was getting resistance because it came back to the dollar. Other people were jealous and he was getting sabotaged. He said people were making life difficult for him. That's why he stopped doing that kind of thing and getting into business and got into people. or humanity.
into philosophy.
Yeah.
actual fact.
Yeah.
He changed it from the physical to actual metaphysical.
Seems like Nikola Tesla had the same life challenges, because Nikola Tesla wasn't interested so much in the money of it as he was in supporting the universe. So that's an interesting idea.
It's also interesting.
He was interested in the money. He was just stopped by J.P. Morgan, John P.
That's
Morgan.
right. With
Morgan,
Let me over to you for a second.
yes.
he was stuck with the Niagara Falls contract, I think, right? They won it, and then Morgan threatened to sue, if I remember correctly, something along those lines. But it's something interesting like that. Henry just brought up the idea of rich dad, poor dad, or anything that right before something's about to take off. If you're in it for this, like, you're not in it for the journey, you're in it for the outcome, that you start to, risk and fear start to to dictate your actions. And those are not actually, that pollutes, that gets back to the idea of pollution, because you pollute your own mind as to why you're doing something in the first place. And because you're tying yourself to what you want the outcome to be, and you're not willing to risk something, as if we have anything to risk to begin with. So anyway, just a thought.
No, but it's very interesting that, and I link that to Bucky defining himself as a verb. And in Kiyosaki's language, sometimes it says between the process and the mission, which one is more important? And the answer says the process, because the process determines who you become. The journey determines who you become, because it embodies all the small choices and all the experiments that you had in the way that are around and feeding back into you, into determining your destiny. So, yeah, go on, Peter.
Oh, sorry, mate. I feel there's with Tesla, there's a perfect example of what you were just saying. Like, I've only read a little bit about him, but I think he stuck to his processes. But there was a time and a timing that wasn't supporting what he did at the time. Yet, whatever it is now, 100 years later, there's a renaissance of interest in a free energy project, because a lot of people can see it could free up the world. And the other aspect of that is, if he hadn't have stuck to his processional experiments and planted the seeds that he had, then I don't know that processional effect would be that interest today. So, because I don't honestly believe we ever get to see the results of our intentions. We may get to see what we think is our results, but we really don't know. And I've seemed to have dropped off.
You're still here.
Okay. Yesterday we were in a group training session, and one of the guys shared an experience of he came to Australia and he really needed to get a job, and he got a job in a factory, and he could look at, and it was a factory where they were his team was responsible for cleaning up the factory so that the food production was safe, and he could see how disjointed it was and how discombobulated. And he put his mind to creating a better process and just started sharing that with people. And today he owns a business that does that for that factory. And the processional effect is also that one of the girls who started with him today, who also was an immigrant to Australia, by committing to his business, is now living in a house of her own, which where she came from in the world, that was an impossible aspiration. So I think there's a fundamental interconnectedness of intentionality that we don't get to see, or sometimes we get to see a little bit of it, but there's a bigger picture that, and it's like Bucky, Bucky, he was a young man. I'd never seen Bucky as a young man except for that video just now. All my photos I'd ever seen of him was as an older man. And he's a young man in swimming togs on a boat near a lake, and it was tragedy, as Raph has said, or John said, about the attempted suicide or contemplated suicide at the death of his daughter and so on. And then I'll devote my life to the service of humanity, and it's a long time later that processional effect of that intention and the process he's created is dominoing into us. And for all I know, another 1,000 groups somewhere around the world studying Bucky. I mean, I think there's a grace that comes from intention that we don't see.
But it's back to faith.
There's gestation.
But Pete, that's actually, Bucky, when he came to a point of contemplating suicide, that in its own was precessive, because he was going to jump over, and then there was this thought that came to him when he tells the story himself. So it is it wasn't, he did not plan to live. His plan was to die at that point. And then, everything relating dynamically, something happened that is unexplained with his previous intention, with the parts of the experience. And he went all the way. And same, the way he left, the way he died is not displayed. He died, he and his wife died 36 minutes apart. Him holding the hand. The wife passed away, and then he passed away. He wasn't sick. He was not sick.
Well, he went there to allow himself to die because she wasn't going to come out of the coma.
Yes.
When they went to his home, they found he'd tidied everything up, left the manuscript of his last book in the middle of his desk. It was clear that he'd left intending not to return. So when he went to the hospital, his intention was to allow his spirit to leave his body. And he managed to do it peacefully, which is an incredible thing when you think about it.
Yep. So to me, that is, when he decided to live on the verge of suicide, it is precessive. When he dies, is having learned and experienced generalized principle and making a decision that is in line with that. That is a local application. I'm just building on what you say, John, that he went to the hospital knowing that his wife wouldn't make it, and made all the preparation and passed away in a way that, to me, I can't explain it. But it looks like, the artifacts that we find indicate that he prepared all of that. So that is an application. Yes, that is really, we're talking about now the manifestation of metaphysical core. That is it, in a sense, to me. I don't know. It is something that I throw,
Well, it was intention, true intention. And I had I was involved in another company, and one of the directors, the main guy that funded it, he sent 2 of us overseas. And when we were overseas that week, he tidied up everything in his office, put all his papers together. And the guys that were back at the office said, you know, his place was always in piles. It was all, and they never saw him for a week. And then after 3 days, they went to his house and they found him just lying in his bed, gone. It finished, you know. So it happens. The mind is very powerful. That's what it comes down
The
to.
Buddha predicted that he would die on a full moon on the day of his 80th birthday, and thousands of people migrated and were there for him to leave, for his body, for him to decide to leave his body behind. What a morbid discussion. This is what happens, or, you know, morbid? I don't know. What a fateful discussion, at least. And which brings us to the idea that that really we're doing what we can here to fulfill, I think, what his ultimate mission would be, that everybody could be involved in these principles. And our goal is to create an artifact. And I'm not even clear that it's possible to do what our goal is, but we have 4 key words that we're working with. If there's any thought that anybody wants to get complete on what we've just been talking about, let's take a moment and make sure everybody's complete, because we've had some really serious ideas come on, and I don't want to quickly change the topic without consensus about it. Is there any completion? Go ahead.
So I just want to clarify something that between this idea, the mission and process relationship between those two, because I look at mission is both basically your principles, and that your mission should be driving the processes that you're supporting, not necessarily the process supporting the mission or dictating the mission. Am I getting that? Is that correct? The way I was thinking about that?
I'm not clear of the word process, because
we were talking about it earlier. Like we're talking.
I mean, it could still be a failed experiment. Example would be that whole rich dad thing. We were on a mission. We wanted to educate global financial around the world. That was a mission. And we did it by recruiting, training, putting in processes. Like he turned up and said, I got a book and I got a game. That's all I got. And then we put everything around that. We created workshops, DVDs, seminars. You know, there was coaching, there was education, all the material, everything behind it was put together. That was a process. We learned from the process and learning, and in that process, we did make connections all around the world. We created processes. We understood how facilitation worked. We understood psychology of people and how they worked and understood. And we did a lot of more with less. That was it. And the only reason that it was even got to that point was because of faith. I mean, technically that the whole thing should have fallen over within 6 months. But people held because they had a belief. They said this is actually something that could actually help people, could make a difference. And that's why we're perpetuated. It wasn't from the money. The money actually came from the people. Kelly moved his whole family across from Australia, you know. In the end, it cost him millions. It cost everybody a lot of money to put in. But we did it based on the faith, because we knew at some point you're going to get an outcome.
The proof of the pudding the proof of the pudding is in the eating. In the Bible, it says you recognize a tree by its fruit. So what the process of a tree yielded? That's essentially, I think that's what is being said.
Right.
They coexist, they are there, but you know, the mission Coabin, Kiyosaki come in with his book and the cash flow game, and that's it. And then what? People will buy the book, but where is the practice of a book? And the process is what allows people to have self-disciplines, to work and to withstand all the challenges that will be in the way in order to reach the goal, isn't it, Henry?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without that, you can't.
What's the application? So we're trying.
Yes.
But I can feel more than see there's a vast ripple effect from what you guys were doing, Henry, and that ripple effect started with, you know, you drop a rock in and it has a little wave that ripples out.
Yeah, processional.
But that ripple effect, once energetic gets out for a while, it's like a wave building up. I mean, I can't remember, I'll have this wrong, but I watched some surfing documentary of these idiots bloody surfing off rocks off Hawaii on waves that were bigger than buildings. And I'm looking at it going, you guys are crazy. And they've got an under the water shot of this guy bouncing along under the ocean where after he's got dumped, and there's rocks bigger than houses going along beside him. And then the commentator said, and this wave started off the coast of Japan 3 weeks ago as a little tiny effect. And that processional effect of something little becoming big. When you were talking about the vision and the faith and the purpose and the intentionality of what you guys were doing with Rich Dad Henry, I'm, you know, I take my hat off to all of you, but I also look at it and go, years later, there's a processional effect of I have no idea, but however many people in the world are committed to creating financial literacy. And that it's that processional effect of the little wave of Japan, you know, 6 months ago, it gets to Hawaii and it's this wave big enough to bloody bounce houses along. You know, we don't always get to see it. It's that processional effect, and good on you. And you know, I'm really feeling that today's talk, the essence of it for me is about faith. It's about faith in, you could call it your mission, your purpose, your soul agreement, whatever. But if something grabs our soul, we know it. And we either have the faith to act on it, and it's a risk, it's an experiment. There's no guarantees, especially if it's connected to business. But, you know, it's a hell of an adventure as well. So.
No, it's good. It's good. Because one of your prime, I guess, things that will help in terms of longevity is purpose.
Right.
And all the books I've read about people that have lived over 100 years old have to have some sort of purpose. If you don't, people give up.
Okay, I'd like to bring this back. Maybe we're not far off, but I would like to bring this back to our artifact, what our goal here. And this video has been really good because it kind of reviewed some things about Buckminster Fuller in general and brought up points that I did not know until I'd heard the video. And some of them I didn't get till the second time. And then some of you guys have learned, you know, you've studied Bucky and know more about that. Are we ready to talk about this artifact in terms of these 4 words that of which pollution is one, that where we can to bring a focus to that artifact thing? Are we ready to talk about that? I can bring up those 4 words. Go ahead.
What, evolution, pollution, sustainability?
Yeah.
And
It was
regenerative.
evolution, pollution, sustainability, regenerative.
Regenerative.
And then we brought in this concept of the class 1 and class 2 types of evolution. Susan brought that in. I'm kind of overwhelmed with this idea of creating an artifact. What do you guys think about the probability or the doability of creating an artifact. What purpose will it serve? What I'm noticing is that I don't always agree with everybody's definitions. I think some people sometimes have an insight that's obviously profound, but I don't understand it. And so it doesn't help me with the definition of the word. And there are words where I think I have a sense of understanding about the definition in the context of what I'm doing in my life and my own business plan. And my assumption is that every one of us on this call have a different business plan. We're each engaged in our own spheres of influence. We each have our own kind of ecology, economic ecology, and relationship ecology. It's cool that we come together, but I think our goal here is to create an artifact that then each of us can use and implement in our own spheres of influence. Am I understanding it correctly? I've asked about 4 questions here, which is not fair. So go ahead and pick one and let's talk about that.
Well, I think this actually, let's talk about purpose. Like, what's the purpose of this? And so I think there has to be some uniform agreement.
Yeah.
As to, because if we're going to, and that purpose would be that we could all use this in our, our own personal spheres. So if that's that's where I think we need to start, is that, I think we need to start with a degree, like with the idea that everybody can use it and it's equally accessible to everybody on the call. And I think if that will force us to really kind of come up with something a little bit more concise, but clear, but comprehensive.
Okay, so kind of continuing on this vein and not to distract, does anyone have any comment on what Joe just said?
Yeah, I think Joe's correct. It's an agreement on specific words, how they're used, our understanding, our apprehension, and also our comprehension on how we use it.
All right.
We as a group, we're almost like a cult where we're creating and defining our own jargon and terminology. We use things in our understanding, simple things just like quadra, in, out, between, and around, as
Right.
opposed to, no such thing as up and down.
Right.
We understand that. That is our understanding. And
Well,
so we define that, those are very simple, basic concepts where Bucky started with. We define that in our artifact. This is our understanding. So someone else, we can teach that now. And then people can start thinking spatially outside of that.
okay.
And then, like Bucky's got words there for pollution. He actually has a definition for pollution. Take those and put them in. And then
Now
modify.
And in that sense, Henry, we've got these 4 words that we're starting with. And I think that one of the ideas that we've talked about is that we were fairly, like when we broke into small groups and we all defined these different words and came back with some ideas, I took some fairly good notes and threw them out there, inviting people to edit them and make them even better. And we could go through and each person, we could come to a consensus, like any word in the dictionary sometimes has 2 or 3 definitions. And depending on the context of the application, like a word might have a different application in physics that it does in biology, that it does in economics. And yet the word, like ephemeralization, could have separate definitions for each of those paradigms, right? So, and each of us got to some we picked a couple words and made our own definitions. We've got those notes, and maybe that's what we should be doing. In other words, maybe we could be picking these 4 words. Joseph was good enough to paste them in here: evolution, pollution, sustainability, and regenerative. And now see, regenerative is an adjective, and all the others are nouns, and I guess that's okay. But if we came to if we went back through our notes and we said, okay, here's the definition for evolution, and I don't, if we came to some standard idea, maybe that's what we're trying to do. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. That is what we're trying to do.
And I don't know that we're trying. That's what the assignment is, or the mission is, right?
Right.
We're doing.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. So, so part of me says, oh, then I should go back and look at all the notes and take the 7 definitions for evolution and then bring them and then send them out to everybody. And then everybody can we can condense them down and see if we want one definition for evolution or if 2 or 3 definitions are appropriate for evolution based on different concepts, keeping in mind that, I think our goal is to create a dictionary with possible usages so that each person can use it in their own sphere of influence. Like, I'm convinced that to say there's no up and down is great, but that doesn't work for me. If I'm an airplane pilot, I need to know what is up and down because I'm going to take my airplane up and I want to land my airplane down. So there are some practical applications. But I do agree with this idea of in and out. And from a cosmic point of view, we've got to change it's been very helpful for me, I'll speak for myself, to change my paradigm from my own little private world to understanding how the universe works. And by understanding that there is no up and down, that there's in and out, there's a round in between, that helps me design my business plan. Where if I stay in the up and down thing, I'm not gonna design my business plan with as much sensitivity to precession. So we want to create a tool, and we want to create an artifact that can be a tool where we can, so that somebody coming in at one level or another can get a grip on it, can apprehend it, and then can implement, right?
Right.
Comments, questions on that? I mean,
I think the very first thing that we ought to do, and I guess intuitively we already got it here, is to think in duality. Always in dualities. When you say evolution, you have to talk about revolution. Not revolution breaking everything, revolution in terms of cycle.
All right.
But right, when you talk about I think that we already came into the understanding, and I don't want to deviate from Bucky or what pollution was. My experience, the experience that I got when we first put up the word pollution, is that everybody talked from his own kind of understanding of what pollution is. I think now we understand that pollution is what is left over that we don't know what to do with yet. So if we know that in any design that we have, we've got to be aware that there's going to be those kind of things. And we are going to cast our net larger, or we're going to expect things different from what we usually expect.
yeah. So
that's already pretty powerful. So if I'm talking about a word, any word that I use, I think that there are 2 that are dual. And then to communicate, I need at least 2. So it makes it the 4. To do something, I will always express ideas in such a way. That in itself is very rich.
okay. And yet, if we come to the word pollution, Manu, to say that pollution is what's left over that we don't know what to do with yet, I don't see any duality there. I love the idea of two-ness. I love the idea of fourness. There might be a way to create a definition with some duality of pollution, but I think that definition, pollution is what's left over from a process that we don't know what to do with yet. I mean, that is very profound.
Right.
And if I'm a business person and I am implementing a plan, and if I am now, because of this definition, I can say, okay, what am I leaving out? What's left over here? Okay, I don't know what to do with it yet. What if I did know what to do with this? How can I make this even better? Do more and more with less and less. So I like that definition of pollution, and I don't see a duality there, Manu, although I love the duality and I
You
love the,
already, you talk about it still.
yeah.
You don't see, but you talk about it. I don't know how you can talk about it, you don't see.
Yeah.
You say you were doing something, you intended doing something. The very thought that there will always be something left over and that we are aware of it, and then you intentionally aware of it, is a duality. There will be something. So how do I account? How do I try my best to account for all those? And if I'm not accounting, how ready I am to face when it happens? That is it.
Okay. And
It's not an apple that you take with another apple to say duality. No, we have to think, as Henry was saying, metaphysically. I don't see it, but it exists. It does exist. There will be something. So how am I preparing for the unexpected?
great. And I think that to build on what you're saying, the idea of pollution indicates that there might be something unexpected that I don't know what to do with it yet. So I think that's all pointing in the right direction. And in terms of a duality, what came up for me is a good word here is synergy or regenerative, maybe, and definitely sustainability in comparison to regenerative. But this idea of synergy is that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. So if I'm creating a business plan and I put this together, when I put A together with B together with C together with D, there's a good likelihood I'm going to have a synergetic E that maybe was not anticipated. I might see it as pollution, or I might see it like Joseph last week talked about the guys. I'm still thinking about Ben and Jerry's who figured out how to supply feed for the pigs with the leftovers of thing. Joseph, you brought up
Hers, I brought up the Hers company and how they essentially use like everything's regenerative. They
right
waste
on.
no water.
And
And yeah, go ahead.
and well, the point is they had something that would have been pollution. It would
Right.
have been left over,
Would have
but
been
they went and thought through the process and said, well, rather than not knowing what to do with this and rather than not wasting our time on it, let's invest our time into it and let's see what we can do. And they eliminated their need for fuel, for outside fuel.
all kinds of
But
things.
Steve, let me be a little bit more practical. Let me put myself in the shoes of Henry. Henry here. I put myself in Henry's shoes. Henry is doing solar, right? He's generating electricity using solar panels. Now, with the abundance of solar panels, what do we do with when they are discarded or when they are changed? What happened to them?
Landfill.
Okay, so energy, generating electricity with a solar panel locally solve a problem a lot more efficiency than having a coal plant 1,000 miles away. Right? It's a lot more effective. But when in a town, everybody has solar panels, okay, and people do alteration to the house, things like that, they're going to break, they're going to do things. There's going to be a lot of solar panels around. What can be done of? So Henry in setting up his business, if he's aware of that and take some anti-entropic measures towards that, he is more educated about pollution than me. That would just come, I want to make profit because it is, the style of a day. I just count the number of installations that I've performed in a month, what's my profit, and that's it. Take it away. Henry, maybe comment better on that. I don't know if I see anything that makes sense.
I'm not sure how it relates to what Steve's trying to do. He talks about his artifact. and how do you create that? Going back to that, I think you're overcomplicating it, Steve. I think all you need to do is create something like a Wikipedia or a depository where you're putting the words in, these are the definitions, people apply it, and then move on. Otherwise, you'll never get beyond your 4 words. You're struggling to get beyond 1 word.
Well,
Go ahead, Joe.
so one thing I would just suggest is that we kind of start to tie. I mean, I'm finding it somewhat helpful to kind of tie some concepts together in addition to our definitions. So if we take the idea of pollution, and we say what is left over, well, then that's when I think of the figures that we went over months ago with what is relevant, what is almost relevant, and what is in our circles of influence, like with what is micro, what is it, micro
relevant.
Micro relevance, and then what is macro in frequency or something. Yeah, so if we have that, so that relates to pollution directly, right? So we start to tie these concepts together. You could start to really start to see where they work all, they're intersected to one another. That's just for me. That's where I think that if you start to tie models into these words and we can apply them universally, that would be a little bit helpful. I don't know if what I said was helpful, but
Oh, I think what you said is helpful. I like Henry's comment about the wiki idea, and that's what we've started doing. Everybody in the group started creating their ideas for these definitions of these words, and we got into small groups. We got quite a bit of energy on that topic. And my issue is, no, I don't know how to use Slack. Nobody's using Slack. I think Slack is out there to be used as a kind of wiki, and yet I'm not sure that maybe it's just me that's not participating fully. I think it would be really good if everybody took it on themselves to create their own dictionary, and we kind of combine those, or we each took maybe each of us take a thing and say, okay, we're going to look back through the notes and say, here are the 4 definitions of and maybe that's what we should do next week on next week's call. We should take the notes out for all those definitions, divide up into small groups, pick the words and say, okay, come up with your 1 definition or 2 or 3, because do you all agree with me that sometimes a word appropriately has 3 definitions? Do you agree with me there?
Yep.
Oh, I think it might have even more than 3.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, good. Because if I'm just a beginning Bucky guy, and if the concept of there's no up and down, there's only in and out and around and between, if that's a new concept with me, I got to grok that thing. I got to play with that how long have we been screwing? I've been screwing with it for a year, and I get it. In, out, between, and around is really powerful. But when I'm sitting down and I want my kid to put that up on the shelf, I can't say put it out on the shelf. I mean, there's a practical application for up and down, and so and yet there's a really powerful when it comes to building a system to understand in, out, and around is powerful.
But Steve,
I will say that I don't feel. Sorry.
You were educated in the up and down. You have to de-educate in the up and down.
I'm going to tell my kid to put that thing out on the shelf. They're supposed to in on the shelf, and they're supposed to know what up means and down means. I think I don't know. I think there's a practical application, and even if I'm in my Bucky world and I realize there's no up and down, at some point I got to communicate with the rest of humanity, or they're going to be just like we're going to be just like Bucky. Nobody understands.
When I come to America, and my first language is not English, and I have to study in an American university or whatever, I have to communicate with people. I have to learn English.
Sure.
I was speaking some other language fluently. So if you really want to impact your grandchildren, you have to force yourself to walk your talk.
I agree.
You make it, if it will be unpractical in the beginning.
Listen,
But you got to be as fluent, you know, if you say, Jamie, go out there, come in here,
meaning up and down.
whatever you know, indicating intentionally something that got to be done.
If I say go out the stairs, if I say go out the stairs to another human being, they're going to think I'm inviting them outdoors. I mean, you know, so no, I agree with you, Manu. If anybody walks their talk in my universe, it's me. And a lot of people do not understand what the F I'm about. I mean, honestly, a lot of people think I'm freaking weird, but no. So, but what do we think about breaking up next week in the groups and taking our definitions and taking these words and then maybe proposing relationships? Because I actually think that every one of these words, like pollution in the context of business, might have one definition. Pollution in the context of biology might have another definition. So
I have a problem, Steve.
No,
I really have a problem because training in the process of I mean, let's call it Bucky's process. If we really want to be familiar with what we call the spherical geometry in our doing, in our things, we have to force ourselves into agreeing on that. I can't reasonably function with in and out and up and down. I really have to make, it was difficult for me in the beginning.
Still bloody difficult for me now.
Yeah. I'm just saying it was difficult, but you have to retrain yourself. It's repetition. If your grandchild thought that you were sending him somewhere else, and then you explain to him, even if he doesn't agree in the beginning, right there, he's going to think. There is a seed that you planted. He's going to think. That's what we're talking about. He is going to think.
Manu, I think this is a perfect example of duality, because Steve's context is saying we need to connect with the wider world. And as I perceive it, your context is this is a Bucky world conversation context. And there's a duality between the two of those. And if I talk to friends of mine who are therapists and we talk about spirit pollution or mind pollution, we understand it to be toxic behavior or guilt or shame or anger or rage or fear or neurosis or obsession. But if I said that out in the general world, you know, a lot of people would look at me mad. If I said that to my theosophical friends who, if I've pronounced that word correctly, who understand the context that our world has a huge context around a savior and a slave and that those two go together, well, in that theosophical society, we understand that that's a context imposed on our society and that's the context of it. But if I talk to a general person and say, most of us are either slaves or the other, the challenge is that it's the context of where you're coming from. So this is the duality. We're looking for the essence of this so that people can implement these principles into their business, their life, their influence, their world. But I think Steve's quite valid. We need to acknowledge that people come to it with a unique perspective that may not be shared from the common ground that we've had of the study.
They have to pay the price.
Yeah.
There's too much. They have to pay the price.
Manu, I agree with you. And
that's
Henry,
what the whole video was about, wasn't it? It was about the choice of the individual. You are the individual. You make that choice. You choose to think in linearly, or you choose to think omnidimensionally. This is the whole thing. Conventional critical path conceptioning is linear and self-uninformative. That the words up and down are linear and self-uninformative. If you want to continue down that path, that is your choice.
Well, true, and it's not. Let me say, I agree with you, Henry, and I agree with you, Manu. If somebody just thinks up and down, if they don't understand in and out, around and between, if they don't understand that and they're trying to develop a business plan or develop some product, they're going to miss something. They've got to transition from up and down into in and out, between and around. So I totally agree with you there. And what I'm hoping is that our artifact does that. Our artifact says, here's what the world thinks, and here's the way to look at this so that what you thought was pollution isn't pollution. What you thought was complete with sustainability isn't complete until it's regenerative. Somehow our artifact needs to create that emphasis.
Yep.
But our artifact says pollution is, because the other one is all over. I mean, you take Webster, that's what you see. When you take Webster, it says, we read it last week or the week before, it said something that is harmful to. That's what it says. But the pollution defined by Bucky has been in there for 50 years and it's still hidden.
Maybe that's a key to this artifact. Maybe the way we could do the artifact is take our word, throw in just like Susan did with what evolution is in Webster. Then she added Bucky's definition of class 1 and class 2 evolution. And now the reader goes, aha, this is the way the world sees it. This is the way I used to look at it. And now there's a new way to look at it. I like that. Maybe Susan solved my problem by, when we create our lexicon, we give a standard definition and then a Bucky twist on that. There might be 2 or 3 standard definitions for a word, and there might be a Bucky twist on each one of those, plus an additional one that's not even a twist, as to, hey, pull your head out and take a look at recession. So maybe that's cool. Go ahead.
Steve, who do you think that in the end Bucky influenced the most? His grandson.
Sure.
That's Jamie Snyder.
Yeah, listen.
A lot of people, I mean, there are thousands, I've met hundreds of people who talk about Bucky. Oh, we studied Bucky, we did this. But you see what they are doing is antithetic to what Bucky is saying, if you understand it a little bit.
And Manu,
so when I try to do, in my environment, or to talk in a way, it brings me a lot of challenges. But it is my choice to take the time to not only stay within that, but also to try to explain to whoever I'm interacting with that this is another way of seeing things.
I agree.
And that is much more powerful.
I agree.
And as Henry says, it is their choice. If I see that I'm wasting my time, I will move on. I will move on. I will choose to move on. My time is limited. My resources are limited.
Yeah, and my thought is at this point that if we create this artifact, it would help people make that choice to understand and move into the Bucky paradigm, because that's where regenerative is going to be found. So I agree with you completely. I hope you're hearing me agree with you. And wouldn't it be cool if our artifact, people read a simple dictionary that said, here's a regular definition, here's the Bucky understanding, shift your paradigm, don't no longer think up and down, think in and out and around and between. Wouldn't that be cool? And is that more than what our challenge is here? Are we just going to list some definitions? I like the idea of building the bridge. I like the idea of our artifact helping people make the choice to do exactly what you said, Manu. What do you guys think? And maybe that's too big of a job. Maybe it's much more simple than that. I do tend to make things complicated. And there's John, an attorney. I mean, how do you get a guy who comes in, going into I guess you do litigation, John, from what I've heard. And if your client opens their mouth, they're going to screw themselves because they're saying the wrong words, because the words they're using in that court are not the right words to say in a court, because there's a lexicon in that court. And to deviate from that, you're going to fail. I don't know, John, what do you think?
No, I think the first thing you've got to do is have agreement about the context and understanding, because as you say, as we've said, words can have a different meaning in different context. So if we're studying Bucky, we're looking at words, particularly from a Bucky point of view. You talked about dictionary definition of evolution, and then you bring in Bucky class 1, class 2 evolution. So you're looking at it from a Bucky point of view. My understanding is we want to expand our understanding of these concepts like pollution beyond the Webster dictionary by reference to Bucky's work.
Yeah. And with Kelly here, the word agreement was one of our first words. Maybe that should be the preface to this whole artifact, that we are creating these definitions to support everyone in coming to an agreement about
and
these
a common understanding.
and a common understanding, so that they stop talking up and down and start talking in and around, so they can build their business and build their design.
Right.
Yeah. And I think agreement was one of the first words. I think macro and micro and universe. I think universe, macro, micro, and agreement need to be right up there at the top in order to help people make the transition. What do you guys think? Where should we start on this?
No, I think pollution's got to be in there.
Well, pollution's got to be in there, but
That's my favorite word at this point.
Well, yeah, me too. But if I understand universe, if I understand macro, and if I understand micro, and then I understand agreement to help all the micros cooperate and cooperate and collaborate, then we can move into pollution.
Yeah.
But pollution itself, in a way, it's said here, it is so revolutionary. I mean, it blows away. We were in that meeting, I think it was a fortnight ago or 3 weeks ago, where pollution was discussed. There were about 15 people in the meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody thought about pollution in terms of something that is harmful to some locality. But it is not.
Right. It's what's left over.
I mean, this here, evolution here, they're talking about it, it's equanimous. It is evolution. Evolution, it is something that exists. It is there. I say evolution, pollution.
Sure, but it's only left over, Joseph, when we haven't figured out what to do with it. Your example,
which would actually make it regenerative.
Exactly right.
So that's the key is I think that it's revolutionary. It really is. Like, this is like something that really redefines the word, makes it useful to me anyway.
Yeah. So what makes it useful?
The fact that it differs so much from the norm, but it's so much more precise in what it actually means. Like, the idea that pollution is something that is in excess of, like, and that then what are you going to do with that excess? You're going to do something that's regenerative. And so it kind of feeds into different words, and it really changes the frame on it, because everybody, as Manu had said, everybody looks at pollution as being bad, not what to do with it. They're trying to eliminate it, as opposed to actually figure out how to make it regenerative. And that's why I posed that example of the Hers potato chip shop that uses it to, basically in a really regenerative fashion.
Cool. So in the chat, we started this with Kelly with the word universe, macro, micro, and we went into agreement. Then we went into operate, cooperate, and collaborate. And I think that if anybody's going to understand how this artifact that hasn't been created yet is going to be usable, is to understand the fact that, hey, you've got your universe, I got my universe. Let's make an agreement as to how we're going to apply these words. Because the universe exists in a process. In that process is procession. And as you start creating a business plan, it'll may be sustainable, but it can be regenerative as long as you don't define pollution the way everybody else defines pollution. I don't know. You see, it's kind of like, I don't know. I want to help people Manu, I want to help people come out of up and down, and I want to help them get into in, out, around, and between. I want them to come out of this absolute reality and understand this duality.
Mm.
You know,
They will never consent. They will never consent to just change. They got to be forced into it. Remember, locally, gravity is twice as powerful as radiation. You want to radiate out of them the up and down.
One of the things that's in my mind at the moment is a conversation that took place over about 3 weeks with Kelly. And it was a conversation context of, you know, business boundaries. And, you know, if I boil it to its essence, he said that he sees his biggest job in his business was to hold people to the agreements that were made. And that, you know, I mean, anyone in business trying to get anyone to cooperate for an extended period of time, that's the art and the science of business. It sounds simple, but it's the experience of it can be hard. But there's not only an agreement, there's an intentionality to the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as I said that, I had the situation with a business where I spent bloody a week and a half of my life with 3 lawyers and 2 accountants drafting up this war and peace document of agreement that covered every atom of every known universe of things that could happen. And, you know, 3 months into that particular business, the other side made evidence by their fruit, by their actions, that they had no intentionality to honour the agreement. So I think one of the essences of what we've got to come to in this artifact is what is the agreement individually, collectively we are having as a context for this artifact? Is it just to document Bucky's views? Is it, as Steve said, to act as a bridge to the wider population if they choose to look at this as a context and take it on? You know, what is the context of within our agreement of what we're creating?
Can I just interject here? Any agreement, and I've had personal experience of this, wound up in litigation with somebody I was in business with. What it taught me is if there is no integrity, it doesn't matter how long or comprehensive the legal agreement is, it won't guarantee you anything. Not based on integrity.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend a lot of money and a lot of time, but you know, legal agreements can be misused as well as used.
Ain't that the truth?
Is important. It's important and it's fundamental. Bucky has said that is the integrity of the individual that is in final examination.
And without integrity,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it goes back to what Henry says is choice. We have a choice. Do we exercise that choice? And with integrity or not? If not, there is no hope. It is oblivion. If yes, it is possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, you know, I'm sitting here brainstorming this because we go back to universe, micro, macro, micro, then this idea of integrity, then the idea of choice. And unless I have integrity, unless I'm making a choice, there is no cooperation. And if there's no integrity and choice and cooperation, then the collaboration is going to be chaotic.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I'm just thinking about what we're doing here. I do like the idea of coming back because we put a lot of good energy in. If we have in our next meeting, we break into small groups, and wow, it's 10:43 already. Luckily, there's only 7 of us here. Hooah! So Peter, what's your takeaway today? How are you feeling? What's your takeaway today?
Yeah, look, I'm actually feeling somewhat invigorated because I actually love the a rigorous discussion, and I think some of our discussions have been rigorous over the last however long this has been going. I think what you just said, Steve, about the universe, the macro, the micro, the integrity, the choice in integrity. You know, if there's not an intention to be integral, to be whole, you know, all the rest sort of flounder around and fall over. But the other really big one that I come back is right at the call, beginning of the call, and it's the topic of faith, because I have zero religious viewpoint on the world, but I have a complete spiritual viewpoint. But faith is actually, you know, the people I love doing business with are the people you could shake their hand and the deal would be done how the deal was discussed, because that's an integrity there. And the people I refuse to do business with are the ones I sense have no intentionality to honour an agreement. But when you've got a friend of mine have been friends and we're just starting a business together, and we were discussing it yesterday afternoon, and one of the things that we discussed was that we have faith in the other, that the other will act in accord with what they said, with what they agreed with, whether that's comfortable or uncomfortable, easy or hard. And that gives us a foundation to go forward. So for me, faith is something that's very, faith to me is something like gravity. It's a universal principle that you can, you either can build foundations because you have it, or you have no foundations that have value if it's not there. Manu, how do you feel, and what was your takeaway today, mate?
I really feel invigorated. I feel good, and I just coming to faith. If I say, show me a straight line, and you can't show me a straight line, you have no integrity, in spite of the fact that you have faith in a straight line. There is no straight line in nature. Show me a straight line, if there is. If you can't show me, your faith is not grounded. So I like to put to faith manifestation into something, and that is integrity. And integrity also says that if something is false, you must change. Otherwise, it is not. It becomes, call it voodoo or whatever. It's not grounded. And that's what I would take away from this. And I also take away that when it comes to the effect, and the question that Bucky asked himself at one point is, what can one man do to affect the whole? What can one man? So I wouldn't underestimate the power of agreement of only these people around here. Because if we commit, each of us, to the integrity of using this process, this process in our own lives, you don't know how much can happen. You don't know how many you can touch. And that is, to me, the importance of it. And also, integrity is not, it is not a principle. Integrity is actually something that we build on in terms of, let me re-say it. We, because somewhere it appeared to me that you have integrity like fundamentally. No, integrity, you build it. Integrity, you acquire it, you nurture it. And that's another takeaway from this discussion that we had today. Otherwise, I'm grateful. Otherwise, I have confidence that we'll progress and that we'll expand our understanding, and then we really faithful in pursuing veritas. That's what I take away. Rufus, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel great, actually. I mean, great discussion today. I think my main takeaway is that what we're building is tetra thoughts that relate to other tetra thoughts and how we can combine them into an artifact. And the thing is tetra thought is something we can teach. We can teach people their own definitions and build their own applications for those various tetra thoughts that are related. Because that's the main thing about it, the thought that they touch on each other and they build a structure or a system, if you will. And I can see a great value in that. And to me, just the definition that Bucky has around pollution has a huge effect. And again, if you look at pollution the way Bucky looked at it, it means something completely different, because it's not that this is bad, we need to get rid of it. This is a problem we need to solve, because what's left over has a processional effect that we don't want. So how do we manage what's left over so that we can actually harvest it and turn it into something else? And so again, the fact that we cannot discuss all these things and we come to terms like things like integrity and faith and how we relate thinking to spirit, I think is also very important, because that's what's lacking in today's world. Today's world is pretty much that what you need to care about is making money, making sure you achieve growth, X% a year, and that's that. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. What we are creating through those thoughts that are mainstream today, we're just again creating more and more pollution. And that is more and more excess or leftovers that we don't know what to do with, or we don't know how to manage. So again, this is a very important discussion, and I feel encouraged to know that other groups like this one discussing Bucky and actually taking Bucky's thinking into what he wanted to create, which is a world that works for everybody by doing more with less. And again, going back to, I mean, our days, Henry, we were in Ristad, I remember Kiyosaki once telling me, but you realize that Bucky was a socialist. So what, I mean, pretty much a word of warning about his thinking. And said, so what's wrong with that? I mean, the guy cared about people. And these, the whole philosophy, you cannot just take precession and, doing more with less and fulfill your purpose, and nature will take care of you, or the universe will take care of you. I mean, that to me is pretty much like, I know, trying to become a Buddhist, but I say, actually, I want to be a Buddhist, but that's one Buddha, So anyway, that's what I come to think about today, and how important it is that what we do and the way of thinking that we all share. And that means we care about what happens. We care about the impact we have in our surroundings. As Manu said, we all work locally, but we understand things globally. And again, global and local, again, that's another duality. So the great thing about Bucky thinking is start with dualities, and they turn into tetra thoughts, and then tetra thoughts that relate to other tetra thoughts. And then you build these. I remember when I was talking about business, I think Kelly has about 36 different elements or more around business and how they all relate. Again, it's all based on Bucky, and it's very, very important to teach and for people trying to get into business to understand. But again, we need to go beyond just making money. Not because it gets boring, as as Kelly says, because it's just, I'd rather make sense than make money. Anyway, so that's my takeaway today. So Henry, how about you, mate? How's you feeling about your takeaway?
Thanks, Raffers. Today, enjoyed the call. Good discussion. You know, I enjoyed the video and parts that we pulled out and contributions. I think Peter hit on the nail about faith, how we discussed that and purpose. I like that. Ephemeralization and the choice of the individuals. I mean, choice of the individuals, it could go on. There's a lot of depth in that where it comes back to the intuitive, how we think, how we feel, how that affects our decision-making process. That's for another day. We have a wealth of knowledge within what we do. In this group, we all know a little bit of something, and that is the whole point of the artifact. And Slack was the agreed kind of, I guess, media or thing to use to represent this, to put it together. I believe, is it Catalina that knows how to run it better than anybody else? Someone needs to do it. If it's not you, Steve, someone needs to do it and just put it in and get on with it. It's not about, it reminds me of when we stood in front of this crowd and people were, you know, in front of their games. What do? Roll the dice. Just roll the dice. Just get on with it. Don't talk about it. Don't discuss it. Roll the dice. And then we'll actually make some progress. Because this has been going on for a long time. Weeks and weeks and weeks. We discuss it again and again and again. And guess what? Nothing's changed. You actually have to get on with it and do it. That's my thoughts, and that's what I got out of it. Joe, how do you feel, and what did you get out of it today?
It's going to be tough to be follow that, but I had a great time, and I feel pretty good, and as I usually do with this group. There are a lot of things that I really like the idea that we're working with Tetra thoughts, as Raffers had pointed out, and how we get there from dualities. I think that that's a really important point, because once we're able to start to see these connections, we're able to draw boundaries around the words themselves. So I think that that's a really important point, because everything's interconnected. And then I agree with you, Henry. We need to start just get moving on Slack, and that was agreed upon platform. So you know, it's something that maybe we just get the conversation started and rolling, with a couple definitions that we feel pretty comfortable with, maybe, and just that maybe that little push will keep us going. But I think we made a lot of good progress today. I mean, I think we had some conversations around, obviously the terms themselves, but even I really appreciated the ephemeralization aspect of things, and as well as reminding myself a little bit of what Bucky was countering at that time, which was Malthusian economics. I had not thought about that for a while. So thank you. And John, how do you feel? What'd you get out of today?
Good day. I felt Bucky more present than I usually do. Felt quite connected with him and thought a lot about his life and some of the things I know about him. And several really, really important words that kept coming back: faith, integrity, and pollution, particularly in the world we're living in at the moment. Yeah, I enjoyed being part of it and enjoyed being prompted to think about things I wouldn't normally think about during the week. And particularly from a Bucky point of view, because it's very easy to just be caught up in the day-to-day and not to put those distinctions, those meanings on words, and to seek that greater depth and clarity. So yeah, very worthwhile for me. And Steve, are you the lucky last?
Yeah, and it's 10:59, and I'm just turning this thing off at 11 o'clock, even if I'm not done saying what I'm supposed to say. No, I'm grateful for the concept, Henry, of wiki that came through. John, I'm so glad you brought up integrity, because that is a critical aspect of any human endeavor. I love everybody sharing, and we're going to proceed with what's going on next week. Let's hope maybe Kelly will be back next week, and let's hope the ladies are back so we get a lot more energy on the call. We'll see you
Thanks,
next week. And look, it's not yet the top of the hour.
Almost there. Almost there.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.